Is it going? Hello and welcome to Ephemera. I am fantasy author KT Brisky.
And I'm editor Jen R. Albert. We hope you are enjoying our theme music courtesy of Alex White. Welcome to anyone joining us for the first time, and welcome back to those of you who have visited our virtual home before. For those of you who are new, Ephemera is an award-nominated reading series chaired by KT and myself.
Pre-COVID, we held events in the Glad Day bookshop, and while we await our triumphant return, we are delighted to have you and all of the themes in your heart right here on YouTube. And we would like to begin tonight by acknowledging that the land on which I live and work is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. This land is covered under Treaty 13 and is part of the Dish with One Spoon.
And the land on which I live and work is situated upon the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and the Mississaugas, and is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant. Additionally, this land is covered by the Between the Lakes Purchase 1792 between the Crown and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation.
One approach to land acknowledgements is to place yourself and to reflect on your relationship with the land from which you're speaking and the land from which you come. I think it's always a good time to do that, but this month, for me, as I speak on this land, it's especially so, because I am here on this land because in 1898, Piotr and Melania Britsky, my great-great-grandparents, left Ukraine and settled on land that we now call Saskatchewan. That land is part of Treaty 4 and is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Métis Nation, the Anishinabeg, and the Oceti-Sakowin. Piotr and Melania probably didn't know that. They came because the Canadian federal government was giving free land to settle the West. Of course, we know that land was not free, and it had been inhabited for millennia. It is a fairly textbook Canadian colonization narrative. And there's so much we could talk about. We could talk about John A. Macdonald's policy of starving Western Indigenous communities off their land and out to the path of his railroad, a genocidal policy that enabled the government to give land to white European farmers like Piotr and Melania. We could talk about late 19th century migration patterns and how the government began courting Eastern Europeans because, wow, there's just so much land in the prairies that needed cultivation. The land from which my great-great-grandparents came has a long history of contestation. They came, as far as I can tell, from the western part of Ukraine, from a region that's sometimes been the Austrian Empire and sometimes has been Poland and has also been Ukraine at various points. Now in 2022, we watch in horror as Ukraine's sovereignty is threatened by a cruel man starting an unprovoked war. The war in Ukraine and genocide in Canada can't be conflated. They're not the same. But I think we settlers can interrogate our reactions to both and why we have them. And I urge us to come together in support of justice, sovereign rights, and equity for the Indigenous peoples on this land. I am a product of a textbook Canadian colonization narrative, but it's up to me to change the course of that story and to honor my commitment to truth and reconciliation. And I challenge you to do the same. Thank you.
So you're probably all wondering about this month's theme. That is bring your own theme. You see, we've noticed a certain seasonal rhythm to our ephemeral year. November is all about Prancy's birthday. February is for friendship, and March is for chaos.
We first noticed this fact at our last in-person event 2 years ago, I should add, in which I streamed in remotely as a robot and also as a horrific, unknowing harbinger of things to come.
And frankly, we're super into all things meta. So, what better theme than all of them?
And to bring our own theme, I've got ours right.
Uh,
Uh-oh.
you okay?
Yeah, everything is fine. But oh, look, it looks like it's time for you to introduce our first reader.
Okay, right you are. Nicole J. LeBoeuf writes short works of fantasy, science fiction, and horror that have appeared in such venues, fabulous venues as Cast of Wonders, Daily Science Fiction, and Apex Magazine. Originally from New Orleans, she currently lives, writes, and skates roller derby in Boulder, Colorado. That's amazing. Her derby name is Fleur de Beast. Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you very much. As themes go, I'm going to say my theme is tiny gems, because these 4 very short things I've brought today, well, they're tiny and they're also kind of hard to find, mostly being in places that are no longer funked. They are defunct, alas. This first poem appeared in Departure Mirror Quarterly in early last year. Reasonable accommodations. Long before it rises in the evening, the moon's already full, has been for hours. 1 out of every 28 mornings, I wake up mostly cervine with a sour disposition. It's going to be one of those awkward days again. At least my boss is patient. He understands that business casual's hard to pull off with hooves. I can't wear patent leather shoes or any clothes at all. My boss says that's okay, but draws the line at walking on all 4s. It's not professional. I've learned to go upright and, lest the tines of my antlers damage the ceiling tiles, keep my head down, just like everyone else. Next, I have a couple of pieces of flash fiction. This first one was published by the much-missed Chicago-based reading series Twilight Tales in 2006. Right door, wrong time. Would you? I'd take him, but his mom would totally freak. Too dangerous back there. Yeah, I said. All those splinters, the horror. Look, will you watch him for me or not? How long? Just 10 minutes. Thanks, Howie. I owe you one. Mara was halfway to the lumberyard by the last sentence, yelling it back across the aisles. The kid barely seemed to register the change in babysitter. He just stood beside the service desk and stared up at all the doors on display. Finally, he approached one of them, a deep mahogany closet door with a tiny, old-fashioned keyhole. Slowly, solemnly, like it was the first gift of Christmas, he raised his hand to the doorknob and turned it. The heavy panel swung outward and nearly knocked him over. He skipped back a step or two. 2 ovals of light shone down, one above the other, where the warehouse fluorescence glared through a couple of toilet seats hanging in the next aisle over. I saw the boy's shoulders sag. It is the right door, though, I said. The kid spun to stare at me, face stuck between hope and embarrassment. Just not the right time is all. He held on to the top of the department counter and stood on tiptoe to whisper, when is the right time? Let's see, moon's almost full. Today's a Tuesday. A couple minutes past midnight, I'd say. But you want to get here by 11:45 just to be sure. The light through the door flickered as a customer passed by. How will I get in? I'll be here. I pulled an overloaded key ring out of my pocket and showed him the key to the main entrance. His eyes widened in the kind of terror that has nothing to do with what might happen and everything to do with what might not. No way Mom will bring me. So walk. I waved at the door. You think there's a car waiting for you over there? But look, kid. I dropped the keys onto the counter and bent down until my eyes were 2 inches from his. You want this or not? Mara's platform boots clacked into earshot along the back aisle. I straightened up and turned just in time to see her turn the corner. All done. How was the squirt? I glanced at the boy. He was tracing the edges of a tiny, old-fashioned key that had bounced into view when the ring hit the counter. Well behaved, boring. Mara leaned over the counter to peck my cheek. Thanks, amigo. Anytime. I poked at a fresh black and blue mark where her shoulder met her neck. Whoopsie, looks like one of those dangerous lumberyard splinters got you there. She snorted and began buttoning up her collar. Just can't keep 'em off me, she sighed. Okay, come on, Bobby, time to head home. I leaned back against the counter and sighed. Damn, yet another useless all-nighter. That one wouldn't be back. I wondered how many of these the guy before me had suffered through before the real thing came along. At least I'd given the kid a relatively early time, midnight, and I'd be out of here. I imagined him showing up just as I was on my way out, his face flushed with daring and exhaustion, feet blistered from a journey that had only just begun, asking, am I too late? Like there was any such thing. Like I couldn't have turned that key for him just now, while Mara was off necking with the guy in the lumberyard. But I have to know first if the kid really means it, if he's willing to risk everything. Because once you go through that door, you don't come back. And this piece was published in the late lamented Idiomancer back in February of 2010. The day the sidewalks melted. You were up to your ankles in concrete and didn't know it yet. An elegant waterfall of sweat poured down your bare shoulders while you stared at your cell phone and swore you'd lost a call. Everyone had. It disrupted signal, even as it made sidewalks run like water and tires melt to goo. It made, God damn it, your last words but one. Maybe they weren't your last words. Maybe you're still alive, somewhere far away, unable to check your voicemail. I've left a lot of voicemail for you since then. I wish I'd called before. You never gave me a chance to tell you I'm sorry. I was caught in it with you. My old Datsun wallowed to a halt and sank onto its rims, and its rims sank into the asphalt. I was scrambling out the passenger side door for the dubious shelter of a coffee shop's awnings before I'd even registered the heat. And all I could think was, it's Detroit again. Detroit really happened. You were right. But right had never been the point. Right had nothing to do with the sudden silence opening between us, a chasm I hadn't noticed until I'd walked right off the cliff with my stupid jokes about factory fumes and mass hallucinations. You asshole, you said, pointing at the empty children's library on Woodward Avenue, where news anchors interviewed the bystanders. That's where my sister works. Even then I laughed. That's what we'd always done, you and I. But you weren't laughing now. So I had to laugh enough for both of us. Lighten up, I called. She'll be fine. You didn't dignify that with an answer. You just got dressed and walked out the door. Next time I saw you was a week ago through the window of this cafe on whose patio I now sought refuge. You were crying, alone in the crowd, and it scared me. It made you a stranger. God damn it, though, that was pure you. Irritated and amused and unflappable, a familiar handhold to cling to while the world turned incomprehensible and wrong. Hobbled in cement, crowned by a Tesla coil diadem. Who cared? You were in the middle of a call, God damn it, and you weren't going to put up with this. Then your cell phone became a tiny sun in your hand that forced me to look away. It was over in a matter of heartbeats. You cried out once, a single unintelligible word in the language of pain. It went straight through me, made you unknown and unknowable the way the sight of your tears had done. I'd run away then, when I should have run to you. And there was no approaching you now. There was no time. The place where you stood inhaled the daylight in a huge, horrified gasp, and that was it. But this time, I promise you, I didn't run away. I raised my burning eyes and watched to the very end. Once things re-solidified, not even ash marked the place where you'd stood, Just a pair of foot-shaped holes remained, no different from the others. The city's going to repave the sidewalks next month, but I brought potting soil and I planted chrysanthemums in your footprints. I've watered them every day. They don't thrive, not in this heat, but I keep trying. And lastly, this poem appeared in Dreams and Nightmares, number 116 in September of 2020. Dreams and Nightmares is still going, but it is print only, so it's a little hard to find. The Ascent of Inanna. From the great below, she set her mind on the great above with great reluctance. It was a daunting climb for one who had been dead. 3 days hung upon a hook, butchered meat left to rot in silence. No pleas, no promises reached her ears, only the buzz of the flies. She had found them companionable. 3 days during which she had not even to support the weight of her own flesh, let alone that of a nation. Now she must once more bear upon her body the pala dress, the garment of ladyship, upon her breast the pectoral that bids men come, in her hand the lapis lazuli measuring rod and line. She must once more carry her people in her heart. From beneath this great burden, Inanna set her mind on the great above and began to ascend. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. That was wonderful. Those were perfectly polished tiny gems. And I very much appreciated that it sounded like we opened with some deer content, which we love here at Ephemera.
It's true.
It's true. It's so fitting. But I'm afraid that I have a confession. I forgot to bring our theme.
What do you mean?
Well, when we said to bring your own theme, goodness, my bow tie is crooked. I assumed that that included us, but I can't think of a theme to bring.
That's conundrum. Maybe you need some inspiration. I know. To help with bring your own theme, maybe you need to, other words, BYOT, you need to BYOB.
Oh, but like we don't drink during this event here while we're on the job.
No. I mean, bring your own book.
Oh.
Audience, help us out. Is there a book that you are super excited to read? Do you have a book or story of your own coming out? Please share it with us. Share it with us in the chat. Maybe that can be our theme.
Yeah, maybe we can be inspired. I've no doubt we will. And I can't wait. But for now, I'm very pleased to introduce our next guest. Shimshon Obadia is an interdisciplinary artist, writer, and community activist living on the unceded territory of the Syilx Okanagan people. Obadia has made creative works presented across the country for organizations ranging from Kelowna Museum Society to the CBC, Radio-Canada. Recently, the Kelowna Art Gallery commissioned them to write an ekphrastic poem, published in print, online, and as part of the corresponding interactive exhibition, a year from now. Most days, they can be found working with Inspired Word Cafe Society, where they host a podcast of the same name of the society, and volunteering with the Okanagan Gender Identity Group. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. It is such a pleasure to be here and get to share some of my words with all of you. So I am gonna be doing something a little experimental, which I want to just thank you so much for trusting me with, because I'm not sure how good this all is, and I really appreciate having that little bit of faith to let me experiment with something that is not as let's just say not as well vetted. But this is a project I've just kind of started while we were all kind of locked up, and I was feeling very edgy and wanting to get something out there through a bit of a less traditional stream, and really just kind of throw words at people. So I started working on this zine that I'm calling Trans Joy versus the Trauma Plot, because There's been a whole bunch of discussion around trauma plots coming up again, as I feel like it comes in these big waves, and maybe might have been set off by a certain New Yorker piece in January. You probably all read. Parl Sagal, the amazing Parl Sagal, wrote this kind of teardown of trauma plots. And my first gut instinct was to go, yeah, no, of course, we don't need more trauma. And then I'm looking at a lot of the stuff that I've written, and I go, I write a lot about my trauma as a trans person, and it's not always bad. So this is kind of inspired by those discussions I've been having with just other writers and people who are kind of around this topic of the trauma plot. And I've been exploring that through a bunch of poems that I wanted to just throw together, have not much overhead or anything, and just throw it out there at people. And so I've been putting these little things together, and it's going to be a very DIY zine. If you want it, I think you can reach out to the Ephemera folks, and we'll figure out a way for you to e-transfer me $2 for the mail, and then I'll just send it to you, because I refuse to take money for this one. I just want to send it out as much as I can, but stamps do cost a little bit of money, and if you do want it, I'd be happy to send that. Just figure out a way to contact them, and you can e-transfer me $2, and I'll give me your address. I'll send it out there. So these are all poems centered around some form of trans joy. They're connected laterally to some form of trauma, but they use the traditional, I guess you could say, trauma plot that is so often associated with trans folk as more something way in the background, not dismissing it, but just having it present and still being able to celebrate that joy. This first one comes from a little bit of an experience I had recently where I was in my bathroom. And it was after a very long day of not being able to find a single user gender neutral washroom, a place I could feel safe in. And my bladder was about to explode. I finally got home, started peeing, and there was this little sweet spot I must have hit with my pee stream, and which I know is a gross thing to think about, but there it was. It was echoing, and it sang to me, and I thought, my goodness, I have to write a poem about this. I mean, I'm going to wash my hands first, but I need to write a poem about this. So this is still very much in progress, as is the rest of this guerrilla style, whatever this zine turns into. But I thought I'd share with you Bathroom Song. Again, my toilet sings a melody in sympathy to me and my sour sweat if I pee in just the right spot. Happy. Of its open mouth smiling, of welcome from the unforgiving outdoors, of familiarity, of sanctuary, and of walking 30 minutes from the bus stop after a day spent running, dodging, and hiding from the tall-looking femme in body hair takes. As if alleviating the dysphoria, soma dysmorphia, image, sex, pain, that standing up to release the too little water, I avoid choosing dehydration in seeking a rest. Room out, being out, coming out in a big, bad, transphobic, binary, bathroom, exclusionary, unsafe, pissed, pot-bellied, yellow, laughing, screaming world. So I wait for this moment, dear refuge, dying for retreat. Back, home, away, an echo off porcelain at just the right angle, ringing, meditative, ungendered, calm, sings, choosing celebration to rinse away fears of stalls broken open mid sentence, of hot, angry, fist-bearing glares, of assault, of assail, and of large, yellow-black pills swallowed with maroon, sugar-free, concentrated extra bitter cranberry juice again. So that's Bathroom Song. And it was kind of the first piece in this little process of kind of contemplating what trans joy and the trauma plot can have in contention with each other and play with one another. And it just got me thinking about these different things that come up around bathrooms and how political using a place to pee is and has become as part of my daily life as a trans person who does not want to have to get a urinary tract infection after every couple days of holding pee in a little too long. And I found a little bit of joy in there, and focusing on that joy in that song really helped me process a lot of those frustrations, and is something that I'm hoping to lean more into as I go through this kind of exploration of whatever trans joy versus the trauma plot is. So I think I have time for probably one more poem here. And I'm just going to do a screen share because not all of these are quite polished yet, but this one is a little bit more put together as something that I wanted to be able to share with all of you. So I'm just going to show you this. And so this is the next poem I'm going to read. This is called Worship. This is a little more of, I guess you could say, an abstracted connection with what it means to experience trans joy without dismissing trauma, and bringing these two things together in this tension. This is about an acceptance of bodies and the diversity of bodies. As a trans non-binary person, I'm often writing about my body in a lot of my poetry, but that's usually the stuff that I just won't send out for publication. I won't do anything with. I'll tend to hide it and go, oh, I'm not gonna put that out there because I think it's it feels a little too deep, a little too personal sometimes. But this was one where I was kind of skirting that line, and I thought, you know what? I'm just throwing these zines out to people, literally just bringing them to events and handing them out, or I guess mailing them if you happen to send me your address and stuff. And I might as well just put this out there and see what happens, because there is something about the act of creating your own body through your embrace as a trans person that at least I found to be very liberating, and basically like a work of art in its own way. So this is Worship. And I'm just going to switch off my screen share here, but I hope you've gotten a chance to see one of the layouts here, just so I can read to all of you. Worship. Of the simple act, there are no limits. The important pleasure of creativity brings us optimistic depression, a special kind of empty. We'll find pencil or pen, bringing life at pace, waiting to be set free. Be surprised as you arabesque, swirling, and even add something about the rhythms of your mind inside every spare moment that we take to indulge ourselves on a regular basis. It's opportunity that sometimes stimulates our right to a mood that deals with aspirations to own vulnerabilities that steer many people by worshiping the needs we often don't act on. Thank you. And I think that just about gets my 10 minutes, probably a little more there. I'm very sorry, but thank you so much for the opportunity to share a bit of an unconventional experiment here. It has been a real pleasure. And if you feel like you want to grab a copy, I'm just making a run of 100 of these and literally just throwing them out to people as fast as I can. So if you happen to want one, feel free to contact the folks at Ephemera. I believe that's the ephemera.series@gmail.com, and we can arrange for you to Venmo me a couple bucks, and I will mail you one and share whatever chaos I end up making with this. But it is a pleasure.
Thank you. It was a pleasure for us, Shimshon, to hear that. Thank you so much for bringing it. And it's such an interesting balance that you achieved with that. I loved the embracing the joy while not dismissing the trauma. I've not seen that kind of really careful, measured take. So thank you so much. And I sometimes write down lines that speak to me, and I chose choosing celebration from this one. So yeah, definitely either send us an email, or you can also just DM us on Twitter at Ephemera Series. How did our book solicitation theme idea scheme pan out?
We have some books. Phototaxis by Olivia Tapiro, which is on the Lammy shortlist. And our former Ephemera guest, Kraken Not Stirred, has written a horror comedy book called Rose. And I also have one next to me, future guest, spoiler alert, Jael Richardson, Gutter Child. Maybe you'll see that soon.
I believe in the business, they call that foreshadowing. From Twitter, we had The Whisper on the Night Wind and How to Take Over the World.
Okay, did that help?
I mean, yeah, I've got some ideas, but I can't tell if they're any good. So maybe the audience can help me decide.
Okay. Well, the audience has excellent taste, so
okay,
maybe they can.
So I've got 4. Okay, so my 4 potential themes are hauntings, wonder, memory, and transformations.
Okay, hauntings, wonder, memory, or transformations. Audience, give us a hand here. Vote for your favorite in chat or on Twitter. And while you think about that, I will introduce our next reader. Stephen Granade is a physicist, speaker, and writer from Huntsville, Alabama, USA, the city with a Saturn V rocket in its skyline. His work has appeared in Escape Pod, Baffling Magazine, and Sub-Q Magazine. His game, Professor of Magical Studies, comes out from Choice of Games later this year, so make sure to check that out. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to get a chance to read. I am going to steal the theme of transformations for the piece that I am going to read, which ran in Baffling Magazine issue 5. And because I am self-indulgent in titles, it is entitled The Sigillist's Notes on the Fell Lord's Staff. Added sigils for Fire Blast, as the new adversary's armor reflects lightning. Sanded off scorch marks. At my lord's instructions, added leather for a more comfortable grip. Sanded away more scorch marks. My lord still uses lightning out of habit. Sharpened the staff's top blades. At my lord's instruction, adjusted the grip's location. Improved miasma sigils to increase range and efficacy. Replaced the blade that snapped when fighting our adversary and their followers. At my lord's instruction, will replace leather grip with, quote, something that won't slip out of my hand. They nearly had my staff from me. Carved sigils into the leather grip to decrease slipperiness. Didn't voice my worry about my lord's safety to him. Resharpened the blades. Please let it be enough to protect him. It's not that my lord would punish me. He forgives my frailties, my desires. If I spoke unguardedly, I do not know what would spill past my lips. Even the smallest crack in a dam is doomed to widen. So I confine my thoughts to these notes and hide them where none can find them. Must research a better sigil for the grip. My lord has long enjoyed watching me ply my craft. When he has time, he joins me in the castle basement. He talks. I work on his staff until it becomes an extension of his will made manifest by my art. He tells me that our adversary has pressed their advantage. My lord has lost some of the lands he had seized, bringing order where before there was but chaos. My lord will prevail, but he worries. And thus I worry. The ache connects us, and I treasure it. Also lengthen staff to improve reach. Added new sigils. Anyone other than my lord or me who grasps it will be poisoned. Let our adversary try to take the staff now. To see my lord's face is to have your every inadequacy laid bare. The curve of his nose is an inevitability, his full lips an invitation. When I blink, I see his visage, an after image carved like sigils. With practice, I am able to look directly at him. It is a plunge in an icy lake, unbearable at first until I grow numb. Every time he returns to my workshop and removes his spiked helm, I must acclimate again. Outside my workshop, he never removes that helm. I am glad, and not only because its sigils protect him. He is a language only I can read. I would not have anyone else learn it. So our adversary's armor is now proof against fire. Let them try ice shards. I labor over the sigils, working and reworking them into the staff's heartwood. Devotion wears a groove and, like all ritual, becomes its own reward. I overheard the Castellan today remark to a courtier that I was, quote, excessively loyal to our lord. He mistakes me. Are you loyal to your breath? It is a thing that you must have whether you want it or not. Our adversary's army surrounds our stronghold's walls. They hold our river. Our water is lost. My lord plans a quick strike, trusting his skill and mine to win the day. I fear it will not work. Other enemies have shattered themselves against the granite of my lord's will, but not this adversary. I have one last trick, a final desperate gambit. I have successfully created sigils of teleportation. Other sigilists have tried and failed. Hard enough to stretch a person, turn them needle fine and punch them through the world's skin. It is possible only if you use their true name to reshape them. Restoring them after is nearly impossible, but not if you sacrifice an artifact of great power. I tell him my plan, what it costs, what it requires, his true name. He would be a fool to give it to me. Men such as him do not trust men such as me. Without hesitation, he tells me. With that name, I have all power over him, to remake him, to destroy him, to save him. The curve of the new sigils capture the essence of who he is. When I am done, I say, place your hands here and here. I slide them into position. My fingers are stubby, scarred embarrassments next to his long, supple ones. Then will it, and you will be transported away from these lands, leaving everyone behind. And this staff, it will snap, but you will be whole. He falls silent. Can your sigils carry more than one? His gaze heats the side of my face like a conflagration. I cannot look at him. What do you mean, my lord? Will they carry you as well? I do not answer. He laces his fingers through mine. Then I shall not use it. I forget myself and turn to him. My eyes sting. You will, for me, for us. And then hands here and here. His forehead is cool against my fevered brow. I do not recall how to breathe. Hands here and here. The crack is as unexpected and all-consuming as an earthquake. Stones tumble from the stronghold's towers. Water, trapped behind a dam, turns stagnant. I should have remembered. The castellan stands beside the adversary. He let them in without a fight. The adversary squats beside where I am chained. You abetted evil, but it is not too late. Make amends. Take me to him. I shake my head, but do not speak. They drop the staff before me, broken like the castellan's vow. You will take me to him. Sanded away burn marks. Recarved sigils of power in the staff. Attuned the staff to the adversary. Banded the staff's center. It will not repair the crack, but it will hold for a time. My lord waits for me. I will return to him. The adversary wishes to follow my lord. They would follow my lord through the world's skin. I alone can give that power to them. If they give me their true name, and then I will destroy them. Thank you.
I probably shouldn't have laughed at that last line, but I did. Yeah, that was incredible. I love found stories in general, but also you could feel the enriching and the evolving as the poor sigilist just poured his little heart out. That was wonderful, Stephen. And there was definitely a point where it's like, wait, Stephen's a physicist. Oh no, I know what's going to happen. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I'm dying to know, what theme did the audience select for us?
Quite a lot of people. Almost everyone wanted hauntings.
I mean, I can't blame them. That's a pretty awesome theme.
Awesome, then problem solved.
Except, I mean, the night's almost over, and I just want to make sure that hauntings fits with everyone else's theme that everyone else brought before I'm like fully convinced.
Y'all did bring your own theme, right? We never
Yes,
did.
everyone else in the audience, you totally brought one, right?
Did you do your homework? Did you bring your homework? We never did ask you. BYOT, after all. What theme is in your heart tonight? Do you have more than one? Let us know in chat or on Twitter.
And it seems that we have come to our final reader tonight. Ai Jiang is a Chinese-Canadian writer, an immigrant from Fujian, and an active member of SFWA. Her work has appeared or is forthcoming in F and SF, The Dark, Pseudopod, Jellyfish Review, Hobart Pulp, and the Master's Review, among others. Find her on Twitter at Ai Jiang with an underscore and online, http:/aijiang.ca. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here tonight and for sending us out in a glorious finale.
Thank you for having me. So I timed myself this morning and I think I might be cutting a bit close, so I'll go fast. I think because a lot of people say my work is very strange, so my theme is strange present realizations. How fitting it is, well, we will see. So this first piece was published in Tales from Between. It's called Don't Scratch. I lay sunburnt on the ground. The night air cooled my searing skin. I did not need to look down to see the red blotches scattered across my body. My limbs tingled as though 1,000 fine hairs were plucked from their roots, but the green of my skin would not leave, only darkened by the rays of light now gone. How I wished I were not the color of unripe leaves before the peak of spring. Don't scratch, child, mother said. Don't scratch. My hands hovered above my elbows before I dropped them down beside me, nails digging into loose soil, imagining it as flesh flaking off my body, leaving only the raw muscle beneath. Why? I asked, though it was directed more at myself than to my mother, who looked onwards, not at me, with a forlorn expression, brows drawn low. Unconsciously, she caressed her own arms, trailing a finger along the skin. The patches of green of my body first became brown, then faded once more to green, like moss crawling up my body, wicked vines with thorns digging into my pores. My fingers crept towards my face, the skin emerald in a reflection of the lake, more jaded than the swaying leaves of trees hovering above my head of my mirror. It was not like their pale, their dark, their tan bodies, so unlike my own. But even as I so desired to be one of them, they hated one another. Though they were in agreement that they despised each other, they shared a common hatred for us. We had fingers and toes webbed in between with gills along our necks. Our eyes were larger than theirs, protruding from my heads like wild analyzing lenses. Why are you not like us? They asked, standing in a ring around my crouching figure when they spotted me a week ago. The scales on my back glistened with murky water and perspiration. Why are we not like them? I asked mother. I clawed at my neck, wanting nothing more than to rip off the moss to reveal what was within, blood and organs, something human. Mother took hold of my wrists with a gentle firmness. Don't scratch, child, don't scratch. What difference did it make? Her repeated words were like a broken record that did not help others accept our presence. My skin changed in vibrancy, olive, pea, lime, forest. No one told me that this was no disease, but just the color of my skin. The moss and vines continued to grow until they covered my entirety, until no one could see what was underneath except my mother. Was that enough? Would that be enough? They pushed me into the lake, but instead of floundering like many of them do, I rested at the bottom with others of my kind who always believed the human world was not for them. Home was safer. My mother's body joined me, sinking into the lake's depths. We watched them from below, their blurred figures looking down with the sky as the backdrop, almost as though that was where they had come from, but we knew better now. I stopped scratching and looked at those above water with pity as they began to claw at one another. Don't scratch, children, don't scratch, I whispered. All right, so the next one was published in the first issue of Tree and Stone. It's called Behind the Tree. The tree out back. He picked at the piece of chicken floating in his bloated noodles. What about it? I watched in irritation when he allowed the chicken to fall from his chopsticks back into the soup, liquid jumping out from the paper cup it came in. Should we cut it? He wiped the soup from the table with his fingers rather than the tissue next to him, then licked his thumb. I cringed at the sight before registering his words. And why would we, should we, do that? I picked up my own tissue and blotted the remaining liquid from the table before he could swipe his fingers across the surface again. It's getting too tall, casting too much shade over the house. He finished the chicken, leaving the noodles floating. Outside, the dining room window swayed the tree and its branches in the heavy wind. Specks of raindrops dotted the window's glass, making it look as though it was snowing rather than raining outside. A dreary snow globe with unclear skies and clear snow. We should do it after it rains, he said. We carved memories into that tree, height lines of our children, our names, our thoughts in obscure symbols that no one else knew but ourselves. Where's the sun? I asked. He looked at me, confused. Behind the clouds. And where are we? I asked. In the kitchen. No. Then where? Behind the tree. And? We don't cut the clouds, so why should we cut the tree? He abandoned his noodles altogether and shook his head, swirling his chopsticks, thinking. Where are the children? I asked. Behind the tree. He pushed the paper cup away. I had stopped eating before, but now I continue eating. We'll wait for the sun to come out, he said. Then we'll trim a few branches. I dropped chicken, slurped soup. He reached over and blotted the excess with tissue. There was a long pause, silence, as he watched me, expectant, with almost a sudden urgency in his eyes. Impatience, breath held. Yes, just a few branches, I finally said. He released his breath. Yes, like the clouds. All right. And the last one is currently unpublished, but all vibes. This one is called We All Fall Down. We no longer left our homes when it rained, at least not those who wanted to live in the past, those who wanted to remain the same for a while longer. A young man stood outside in the pouring rain. He ripped off his windbreaker, his rubber gloves, then kicked off his boots. His bright red socks dampened, turning a deep champagne. He opened his mouth, collecting the rain, no puddles forming around him. He drained the droplets in streams the way dirtied water traveled through the opening of the sewage. His unmarked hands wrinkled, folded, his spine curled within seconds. They didn't recommend standing in the rain for more than a second or two at a time. We would disappear at the minute mark. But there was no pain, at least that's what I had heard, an easy death that left no trace. The man could have been more than 20. What made him desire age, desire death, when his life had been so brief? Unless he had already experienced the weight of the world, the loss of many, the horrific nature of society and human nature at its lowest points. From my balcony, shielded from the pouring rain and wind on the other side of my closed window, I stared, unmoving, unblinking, unable to unwatch the looming death of a person who could have been me, who was really me, who I perhaps wished was me. Not because I wanted death, but because staying inside felt like death, made it feel as though I hadn't been living. The boy's sleek black hair became sparse, turned gray, shifted to white, then it fell and fell and fell until only a single tuft remained, until that too was gone, washed away by the storm, a raging sea pouring from the angered, looming sky. Then he collapsed, and rather than in pain, he looked at peace. No passers-by stopped, no spared glances. I ripped off the curtains and watched as they fell. I reached out a hand and watched as it aged. Kia.
First of all, we are always here for vibes. That was amazing. And also just the range in those three pieces, they're all so beautiful and pack so much into the lines, but in like very different ways. What a treat to see them all together like that. Thank you so much for
It was
doing
a joy.
All right, well, I'm holding my theme of hauntings very close to my heart. What are some of the other themes that our friends in the audience brought tonight?
We have striving, crises, stretching, always important. Small and adorable dogs, also important. Rediscovery.
They're so good. And there's so many. I feel like we need like an overarching umbrella theme to really capture all of the energy tonight, though.
Yeah, it's the night for, what did we say at the top of the show? February was for friendship, March was for
Chaos! Brilliant! We're creatures of cheer and chaos.
totally fitting.
I wonder what this means for next March, but I suppose we will cross that bridge when we get to it. And tonight we have seen so many different themes that we can celebrate until then.
This is true. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. Until next time, please don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Facebook at Ephemera Series, and subscribe to our YouTube page. We would like to thank the Ontario Arts Council and the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America for their funding assistance.
And as we close out tonight, we'd also like to thank our fabulous readers and artists, our composer Alex White, our friends, families, loved ones, and you. Thank you for staying with us, and we will see you at our next event on April 20th, right here on YouTube. Goodbye.